Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started, guys. Just make sure we stay on time here. Thank you for being here in person, and thank you to our Zoom folks out in the internets. We've got a presentation today about fellowships for foreign language studies. So this is actually one of the larger groupings of fellowships that we have. I think the really nice thing with a lot of these is, again, not major specific. So it's really up to you how you want to implement that in the story that you tell in your application. So we're going to talk about a few today: the Boren Awards, critical language scholarships, the Gilman. If you were here yesterday, we went into more details about that. We're going to briefly go over that. JET, EPIC, and the DAAD. So we'll be discussing all of those at least a little bit today. Is anyone familiar with what a critical language is? Give me. What do you think it is? I shouldn't have said yes.
Honest.
You want to take a stab at it?
It's what the United States government has identified as important languages to study.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so these typically end up being languages that are that are not readily taught in schools too, right? So like one of the big ones that comes up year after year is people want to learn Portuguese. That's not a language that is, there's often people that can teach it. In fact, I think at Florida State, if you have proficiency in Portuguese, you have to talk to modern language, and they like make sure that you meet with a member of the community who can assess your level. Like that is where we are with some of these languages. So critical need languages are those languages that the US government believes we need more speakers of. That's how we start with diplomacy and other important government matters. And so they want to increase the people that can do that. Now, these two, Boren and critical language scholarship in particular, are really aimed at that critical need languages. Gilman, it's a subset of what the Gilman Award is, so it's not the primary focus. And then with each of these, they're actually funded by their individual governments. So it's Japan, Korea, and Germany. So they're not necessarily looking at it from critical needs. They just want more people that are speaking their languages, right? And teaching English to their folks. So these fellowships are typically open to students at really all levels. It just depends on where you are maybe in your own language study. So oftentimes it's not a matter of whether or not you're a sophomore versus a junior, but for things like critical language, you have to have maybe a certain level of a language before you can go and do that study. Okay. And some of them do have, really all of these in particular have this very important international travel component. So part of that application then is also talking about how are you going to be able to adapt being in country? Are you going to be able to be resilient in the face of challenges that you might encounter abroad? Okay. So let's start off with the Boren. The Boren idea. David Boren was I believe a U.S. senator, and the idea was to increase, obviously, in international travel and language, especially as it pertains to U.S. national security. So, in part of this, as we're going to get into, where are we? Yeah, okay, so we're gonna, later on. But part of it is really making the case of how does what I'm doing, how is that going to relate to national security later on? How is this language going to help me in pursuit of something related to national security? You do, as part of Boren, have to work for the government for a year. And this is sometimes where people's like klaxons start going off in their head because they don't necessarily want to do that. There's another award that we'll talk about, critical language, that doesn't have this same component to it. But I think it's important to keep in mind that there are lots of ways to meet that 1 year requirement. So yes, they're looking at positions with tier 1 agencies first. Your Department of State. We gotta take off USAID. Gotta change that to Department of War. Department of Homeland Security, internet intelligence communities around the globe, right? That's what they consider tier 1. So if possible, they want you to go into working in one of those agencies for a year. You can, however, go the route of like working for veteran affairs, doing the Peace Corps, right? If you found maybe a job within Congress, you could be doing that, and that would also count towards that year of service. And then they do have this third tier, which is they don't necessarily encourage this out of the three, but it is possible. And this really comes to working with the National Security Education Program. However, you can also do things like volunteering with some of these agencies. So for instance, they've said before, like right now, I think we all know there's a hiring freeze going on with a lot of the government. So a lot of these positions just aren't as available as they used to be. However, for instance, there was someone who had been volunteering with the VA in their area for like the last several months. And they were able to use those hours towards their service for Boren. So there are other ways to meet that service requirement, but oftentimes people are using it as a way to get that first, foot in the door to government work. So certainly something to consider. I think the last time that we spoke to someone from Boren, they had mentioned that the actual percentage of people that like don't end up doing that year of service is so tiny. It's like in the single digit for them. So they're very good about helping people find the positions to make that work. So as far as eligibility, you have to be a US citizen. You have to still be a matriculated student. So that doesn't mean that you have to be enrolled in classes, but you do need to still have that student status, can't be graduated. The scholarship is for undergrads, fellowship is for graduate students. It is very, very common for us to work with seniors on this application, who then we work with the registrar to delay the posting of your degree. So maybe you still walk at graduation in the spring, you go and do your Boren the next year, your degree just doesn't get posted until the spring after that. That way you're still considered a student. And you might be thinking, wow, that doesn't sound right. That is a known loophole that Boren encourages us to do, to work with our registrar's office to accomplish. So please don't let that deter you if you're thinking about it. Yeah, so it helps if you're already thinking about studying in a different part of the world, or you're thinking about if you have some sort of qualified language experience already. Certainly that will be a bonus, but it is not necessarily required for the application. So you will need to complete this sentence, right? If you are interested in Boren, I would like to spend X amount of time in some country to immerse myself in this language because I want to address this particular national security concern in my federal government position with blank, right? All of those components are part of the application. So if you can have this already laid out, it'll make the application much easier. The main thrust of the application is an essay where you are relating your own interests into national security and tying it to the language. So I'll give you an example. We had a student that applied, they're interested in soft diplomacy, working for like the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, doing something like Fulbright, right? So they had talked about, well, I want to go to Turkey, which is this very important area of the world that we've had lots of close ties to internationally. I want to learn Turkish so that I can eventually go back and working for the State Department in Turkey, right? Or in Azerbaijan, in that same area. So it's still relating back to national security, but it's in this lens of soft diplomacy, right? Other swing of that, I think I have their photos here too. I'll just show you those. So that was Caitlin. The other swing of that, Shalom decided that she had been working on like cybersecurity, and in particular wanted to learn Russian. So she decided, well, obviously they're not going to send you to Russia. That's just, sorry to burst any bubbles, but they're not going to do that. They sent her to Latvia. That was where she found a program of study that fit for her to go learn Russian. So she talked about the importance of Latvia in position to that sort of geopolitical area, and then also how that related back to national security for cybersecurity. There's lots of ways to approach this application. It's just important that you can relate the country and the language to what you're doing, right? And as long as you can answer or fill in the blanks here for this fun Mad Lib, you should be fine, right? This is really the jumping off point. When students first come and talk to me about Boren, I usually ask them, so how long do you want to spend in country? What country? What language? I'm asking everything that's here. So if you already know the answer to that, you're in a really good place. There are some special initiatives. So if you are, say, a STEM student, you can actually lower the amount of time that you would be in country. You can be there for as little as 8 weeks doing a language intensive. There are also 2 flagship initiatives. So whereas with Boren, you're really designing your own language study, you're designing, you're finding the place that you want to study in, you are telling them this is how I'm going to be essentially learning the language for 20 hours a week, right? If you are in a flagship initiative, they have that set up for you. So it's a little more structured, but it's, I like to point it out because oftentimes we have someone that wants to do French, for instance, for Boren. They're not going to send you to France for that, right? That doesn't really advance their national security concerns. They will do is end up sending you to Africa with your French. So thinking of other, Francophone countries, that is where you're more likely to be sent for some of these languages. And I mention that because with CLS, as you'll see, there's very specific languages. Boren doesn't have that. So there are definitely preferred languages, but if you can make the case for why you should be studying a particular language in a particular country, that's still possible with Boren. Okay. If you take a look at their website, they have a really nice map. Hey, welcome. They have a really nice map that goes over here, sort of the preferred countries and preferred languages. Again, that's not by any means to be definitive. It's just to get you guys thinking about, okay, this is what they've maybe approved in the past. I think it's also really handy because they put on there where people have studied previously too. So if you feel like, how am I supposed to find an institution in another country? Look at the list of where people have gone before. That can be really, really helpful. Okay, as far as deadlines, we do have a campus deadline for Boren, so we want to make sure that people are as prepared as possible. So our deadline is November 20th. That allows us time to pair you with a faculty member who has previously worked with our Boren applicants, and they can provide you feedback. These are largely faculty members in like IA, in the College of Social Science and Public Policy. So they're very well versed in especially the national security side of those applications. So we have it set for November 20th, and then the national deadline is in January. Technically, there's nothing stopping you from not meeting that campus deadline. It just means that you don't have that secondary set of eyes from someone who has way more experience than anyone in this building. Okay, so we encourage everyone to be meeting this deadline. If you're working with us anyway, I have yet to come across someone who has been working with us who hasn't met it. So. Okay, and just going back, these are our 3 most recent. So Shalom was in Latvia, Caitlin was in Azerbaijan, as I mentioned, and then Kate was in Indonesia, and she actually ended up extending her time there. So there are opportunities to do that with Boren as well. But you are creating your own language study. And part of that is explaining to them, all right, if I'm in the classroom for maybe only, 12 hours a week, here's how I'm going to get another 8 hours of instruction, right? And maybe that is tutoring. Maybe that is you, working with your host family. So oftentimes you're staying in a homestay type of situation. So that is all part of the application. They really want to see, not only do you have an idea of how the language and country and your interests relate to national security, but can you put together sort of that study plan for when you're overseas? All right, so let's talk about CLS. So this is sort of seen as the counterpoint to the Boren. CLS is also looking to increase the amount of people that are speaking critical languages around the globe, especially as it pertains to the US government. Okay, so these are summer experiences. So as with Boren, very common for people to be gone for like 8 to 10 months for Boren. This is just for that summer. It does come in sort of two sizes. So there's CLS and then there's CLS Spark, which is an online initiative. And I'll get into what that means in just a moment. So unlike Boren, where there's a little more flexibility with the amount of languages that are available, CLS has a very strict languages that they will work with folks on. If you are applying for, say, Japanese, they also have a very specific place that they will put you into for Japanese in Japan. So you don't have as much flexibility as the Boren as far as that planning. You're just going to go wherever they tell you to go. You do not have to have previous language experience in Hindi, Indonesian, Persian, Portuguese, Swahili, Turkish, or Urdu in order to apply for those programs. If, however, you are applying to Arabic, the Chinese, the Korean, or the Russian program, you do have to have that 1 year of experience, 2 years for Japanese. Like I said, the CLS Spark program, this is a bit different. It's online, it's not in country. But if you are missing maybe the proficiency level, or you're not quite where you need to be with the languages, all of these are offered now through the CLS Spark program. Yeah.
Does the 1 year, is it like the 1 year before summer starts or 1 year by the time you do your application? So let's say if you're doing a year of it right now, which like Russian, for example, would you be able to do Russian in the summer?
Yes, you should be able to. So in part of the application, you're talking about sort of where your study plans have been essentially up until that point. So when you go for CLS, there's a little bit of like, I mean, there's a fair amount of trust there that you're coming to the table with the language that you say you are, right?
Yeah.
You have to do a pre and post test for the CLS, so they'll know really fast if you don't actually have the level that you need.
I see. And
So.
does it help if you have also previous experience from home, let's say? Like,
Oh yeah.
So even if you do like a year of study, you still.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There are, if you go on to, it's the CLS, the language page, they actually have how they break down the tiers. So what does it mean to be like beginner, intermediate, and advanced? So it's not necessarily the like the level in school, but just, you know, where you might fall given all of your language experience. So I definitely, I mean, any sort of prerequisites for CLS, check this out because it does give a nice breakdown of what they're sort of expecting for each of those languages.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just, you know, sort of hammering home the point, CLS is made for the summer. It's made for that shorter term, but it's just as intense, right? This isn't like a fun, you know, summer abroad. I mean, it can be fun, but you're going to be in a classroom for, you know, 30 hours a week, maybe doing just this. So it's really looking at a heavy language acquisition and fast language acquisition. The application itself, you do have to choose appropriate language. You don't necessarily need letters of rec for this, I believe. I think this is one of the few that doesn't require letters of rec. There's the basic demographic stuff that you should just expect to see on every application that you fill out. And then there were 3 essay questions. I say were because maybe there still will be, but right now a lot of things are changing with the US government. This is funded by the State Department, in part by the State Department. Many of the awards that are starting this season have had small tweaks to their prompts and what's being required. So I present all of this as this is what happened last year, with the knowledge that that might not be what's happening this year, right? The deadline has traditionally been mid-November, but it's also usually been up by now, and it's not currently. So we are still waiting to hear, but as far as we're concerned, no news is good news. So you will see once something is available because we'll start advertising it pretty heavily. But in the past, they've had these 3 essays: resilience and preparation for CLS, your ability to be a citizen, diplomat, right? How are you going to share your American culture abroad? And then that commitment to the language study. And so part of that's going to be, you know, what you're currently maybe doing in school, but also things like home practice as well, right? So all of those have been like the 3 shorter answers, and then this statement of grant purpose that gets into, you know, what are your what's the plan, right, after all this? Why are you motivated to learn this language versus others? That all becomes part of your application. And these were our recipients last year. So Rosalind and Aria going to Jordan and Japan. But you can see Aria is an international affairs, Rosalind's an anthropologist, right? So again, not anything that's major specific. It's making that case for why is it that you need this particular language for what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, if you were here yesterday, you got a very long introduction to what the Gilman Scholarship is. If you weren't, as I guess the too long didn't read, it's for Pell eligible students. It provides funding for studying abroad in credit bearing abroad programs. As an addition to that, you can also get funding to study a language. So if you are, say for instance, wanting to go to Jordan, it's very common for people then to tack on like, well, I'm really hoping to also study Arabic while I'm there, right? It's an extra little essay that attaches to the application. It's just an additional component to the Gilman. So you have the chance to then receive up to $8,000 in funding for your Gilman and the language component. And STEM as well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that deadline is October 3rd. Next Tuesday, we will be doing open office hours for Gilman. So if you have any questions about the award, or even if you've started working on the application, you can come talk to us then. We're happy to answer any quick questions. And then on October 3rd, because the Gilman does not require letters of rec, it is possible to start that application really late, though I do not recommend it. We are having kind of a writing party from 4 to 6 up in the Great Hall. So if you want to just work on your application, have like a dedicated 2 hours to be doing that and be able to get live feedback right then, that's what we'll be doing the afternoon of October 3rd. Okay. All right, let's talk about the JET program. So the JET is, they have these language, assistant language teachers, which is where we usually have our students going to first for JET, and you're going over to teach English. So for those of you that are maybe familiar with like Fulbright, they have their ETAs, the English Teaching Assistantships. It's kind of that, just only in Japan, right? Funded by the Japanese government. It's very competitive, but that shouldn't stop you. Everything's competitive. And so why would this be any different, right? And especially if you already have experience with Japanese, or you have experience with like teaching English as a second language, right? If you're doing the TESOL or the TEFL certificate or program, it's a really great opportunity to put that into action. So I think right now the application hasn't opened quite yet, but it's usually within like the next 2 weeks that it opens. I think last year was like September 26th or something. So very common for us to work on this as well. Feel free to reach out. I mean, you can find out more on their website, although I will say the application or the website is a little unwieldy. The language assistant, the assistant language teachers are where most of our students start. If you are there for multiple years or you have more experience in the language, you might be able to move up to something like the coordinator position. It really depends. Okay. Epic, again, another way for you to teach English abroad, and this is through Korea. So they are just looking for people, again, who, if you have the TESOL, if you have the TEFL, or you just have a real genuine interest in teaching English, this is a really fantastic opportunity. And obviously with this or with JET, you're given the chance to work on those languages in country, right? Yes, you're going to be in a classroom, you're going to be teaching English. Not going to be there all the time. And so being able to work on those language skills in tandem as your students are learning is kind of nice cyclical moment for you. Applications for this open in the spring, but they do have a rolling admission. So I believe there's one that's closer in the fall, but I think the deadline is like almost too close right now. But looking at next year, check out that the application, see if that's something that you'd like to do. Again, we're happy to work with you on those applications. And then the last one, I'm not pronouncing it. It's the German Academic Exchange Service, DAAD. And what did that mean? Okay. So DAAD has people come over. You maybe if you have friends, particularly in STEM, they may have heard of DAAD Rise, which is a chance for you to go and do lab work in Germany for the summer. This is just a different side of that same program. So they fund folks to go do STEM research, but they also fund them to come over and learn German. So the students that we have had that have gone through this really enjoy it. It's quite fun. And this website is also kind of a mess. So we are happy to walk you through it because it's definitely one that can get a little unwieldy. Applications for that for the summer semester are in early January. That's typically when they're due. I want to say that it opens in October, like mid-October is typically around the time that the DAAD programs or DAAD programs open. So you can start talking to us about it now, but just know that these things are still waiting to be open. Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about these programs. How many of you were already familiar with ONF before you came in today? Yeah, I would hope so. Right? Yeah. So we help students find and apply to different fellowships, right? And the hope is that in going through this process, you gain not just a potential award, right? These awards are competitive. You're looking at, I don't know, acceptance rates in like the low tens in some cases, maybe in the single digits. It doesn't mean it's impossible. Every year we send students on these different fellowships. And so the hope is that by going through this, though, you at least gain some clarity on what matters to you, what your goals are, how to articulate that, you know, that like elevator pitch. Obviously, we hope that your written communication skills increase from doing this and that you feel more prepared for whatever that next step might be. I'll point out too that we, when you graduate, if you decide that there is a fellowship that you really want to apply to, that, you know, maybe now is the time for you to do Fulbright. You didn't really think about it before, but you want to apply now. As long as you haven't enrolled at another institution, you can come back and work with ONF. So our general feeling is like you're ours until you're not. So feel free to come back anytime. And if you do end up going to grad school at FSU, there's actually a whole office on the 4th floor that's for graduate fellowships and awards. So, I mean, yeah, why work with us? We're fun. We're a fun group. We're a pretty boutique office. There's 3 of us right now. We may have a 4th in a few months' time, but all of these awards, there is something to be said for having to constantly refine what matters to you, right? So much of college is just figuring out what you want to do and how you're going to do it. So being able to articulate that idea as quickly as possible and be able to spit that off, it can be very, very helpful. You never know who might be available or around to you, right? The connections that you can make. So we hope to take some of the sting out of that application process. As you saw in some of them, it's like, you know, tell us how you're resilient. Oh, by the way, you have 300 words to do that, right? Tell us why this matters to you so much and your deeply held beliefs, and you've got 250 words, right? The worst is when they do characters. Oh my goodness. So the hope is that in going through this, you feel a little more prepared for those types of opportunities. I had a student whose dad used to tell her, no is an answer you already have, right? So if something is interesting to you, do it. Come to us, talk to us about it. Like the same result happens if you apply and you don't get it and you never did it, right? But at least if you try, you had a chance. So that is what we care about first and foremost at ONF. Does anyone have any questions about the fellowships or anything in particular? Yeah.
Would you recommend focusing on one application or, because I'm interested in 3?
Yeah. If you have the bandwidth, do all 3. Yeah, if not, figure out which one you really want to do and we'll go from there. We also, I'm a big planner, like to see sort of, I call them like the tent pole, you know, scholarships. maybe you're not ready for this one, but what can you do in front of it to be more prepared? And so if there are ones that you're really interested in, but maybe you could do later, maybe we think about like, what does that timeline look like? You know, you want to give yourself, I would say, with most of these awards, at least 4 to 6 weeks before it's due to really work on it. Because you can't really like write all in one night and then you're like, that was great. Like, no, you're gonna want to come back to that. You know, you may meet with me and it'll be the first draft I see, but that should probably be like your second or third draft of just looking at your materials, right? So it's never something that you can really do like the night before, and have it be really as good as it could be. So I think just making sure you give yourself enough time, you can sort of decide, ooh, maybe I don't really have bandwidth for all 3 of these, but I could certainly do 2, right? Neat, and then there. Yeah.
I was just curious, so for, with all these, different options for countries, is there by chance like a list of options that we may have, or is there like a list of like no-nos, like for places like they just won't allow you to go, or like places they will? Because I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, with CLS, it's pretty prescribed, like this is where you're gonna go. Are you talking about like for Boren?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you go on Boren's website, they
Okay.
actually have a map of the world that shows like, here's the countries we will not send you to.
Okay.
Here's the ones that you could potentially be sent to.
Mhm.
Here's the ones we really want you to apply to.
Okay.
So you can sort of cater your application based on that. I mean, they're with any of the things, especially through the State Department, right?
Mhm.
If a country is at a anything higher than a level 2, it's unlikely that they're going to send you there.
Yeah.
So
And then just one real quick add on too for the CLS too. I was just kind of curious. Do they also have a list on the website? For
Yes.
places they're looking like they'll send you to depending on the language.
yeah, so if you go on the so their languages website, you can. There's a couple of ways you can look at it, but when you click into the individual languages, it'll actually show you the institutions that they've been sending people to for like the last few years.
Perfect.
It's never a guarantee, it's sort of whatever deal they make with the governing body. But like I will say, I think for Arabic, it's been pretty consistent. There's a place in Jordan that they've been routinely sending people.
When does CLS open?
I mean,
Yeah.
traditionally it would be open now, but it has not opened yet.
Yeah, so this is generalizing, but
Mhm.
would you say the applications they look at the person in totality, resume and all that, or just your specific application?
It's like a very holistic process. Yeah. So for instance, with CLS, so I've been a reader for CLS and I've been a reader for Gilman before. They usually send us like a batch of applications. They have a rubric that they want us to use that incorporates every single part of your application. And then we go through and we rank it, not rank it, but we like score it based off of the rubric. And they start looking at, okay, who had, the highest scores out of like these 2 reviewers who had the same batch. And they try to see where that meshes up the best. Same sort of thing happens with Gilman. They have us sit down, only that time, you have to like talk to the other person and like maybe you don't always agree. And then you start talking about the applications and that starts getting into the nitty-gritty too. The people that are reading for these things are super committed to having a real holistic approach to this entire process. So yeah, they will see everything and take that into consideration.
Is the DAAD, the one in Germany, is that only for like undergrad?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll have to check. I haven't had someone that was going into graduate school and was thinking about applying. Yeah, I have to look into that. If you want to shoot me an email, I can follow up with you.
Which one would you best recommend for a Indo-European language, like a more Romance language?
Well, the problem with the Romance languages, usually they're not getting funded as much, right? Because there's more access to them. You could potentially make a case for something with Boren, right? But it would have to be in a country that's not like the first one that comes to mind for that. Every year we get someone that wants to do like they wanna do Spanish, but they wanna go to Mexico for it. It's like, sorry, they're not gonna fund that. So, I think it's just making the case for like, okay, but how do you not already have access to this? And if you don't, then how does this relate to national security for you to get this when you could just as easily get it other places? Yeah. Like, why do they have to send you to country, right? And I think that's really the big takeaway for that. Yeah.
I don't know if this was asked yet, but where can we find the slides online or?
Yeah, so this is being recorded. Hi, you'll receive a copy of the recording after this, and then we can do a public view link, that's fine, on Canva. So you'll get a link to like the public view on this. And I'll update the names of the departments on board that are clearly no longer with us.
I
Yeah.
think you already answered this, if someone asked, do they consider Spanish to be a critical language?
No, they do not. No. Yes. Any other questions?
This is like fairly specific, but for CLS, you said that they cover like the full cost. Does that include the ticket there? Like if I were to go to Turkey?
I think last time it's some sort of like stipend that they, like you have to submit the paperwork and. Did Caitlin have to do? I'm not sure if she had to be reimbursed or not, or if it was something that was given ahead of time.
So
Usually they try to work with you so that you're not just high and dry.
Okay.
Yeah. Most of these, I mean, they're pretty well funded, so most things are covered. I think there are some cases where like they won't cover people's passports, you know, like you have to get your passport separately if you don't have it.
Okay.
Yeah, every scholarship has different, like, because they're all run by different agencies or different organizations, they all have different requirements and what they will cover when they say this is like fully covered. So it's kind of reading the fine print to make sure it makes is everything that you need it to be. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. If you didn't already, snacks and swag, please help yourself. We're trying to find good homes for everything over there. And we have, I'll mention one last thing, sorry, just remembering this now. We have someone coming on October 1st from Boren to discuss the Boren Award. So they will be going into way more details. If you have those specific questions, they can answer them for you. The information for that is on our socials. So
It's at 3 p.m. upstairs.
yeah, 3 p.m. upstairs in the Great Hall, but if LinkedIn or Instagram, you'll find the information for that and the registration stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have another question, so I